So blessed with music here at One World. Oh, thank you. So welcome. Thank you for coming. The first thing I want to say is thank you to Reverend Sydney for being here last week. I knew you were smashed. I so appreciate it. Thank you. As she spoke on our quest for meaning. Thank you. So today, on this beauteous spring morning, we are exploring the question for May, which is how shall we live? How shall we live? As I've said in past talks, as we study the perennial wisdom, how shall we live is one of 5 great questions that the world's enduring faith traditions ask. How do we spend the time that is given to us? Now, you may think that only people with money or time or leisure really have the opportunity to ask that question, but that's not the case. All of us, whatever is going on in our lives, we all have the space to structure our lives. We all have the opportunity to make choices in our lives. We all have the freedom to determine how we shall live, whatever our circumstance. My research and my inspiration for this talk comes from Wayne Mueller's book titled, this will stun you, How Then Shall We Live? Okay. It is an excellent book and I really recommend it to you. For those who don't know him, Wayne Mueller is an author, he's a teacher, he's a therapist, he's a minister, and he's also the founder of an organization that feeds the homeless. It's called Bread for the Journey. In his book, he discusses 4 main questions that he believes frame our lives. The first is, who am I? We're not going to talk about all these today, but I'm telling you what they are. I really recommend this book. If you have a second, or have many seconds, read it because it's a wonderful book. The first question is, who am I? The second is, what do I love? And the last is, what is my gift to the family of the earth? Now you can just tell from the energy of those questions that I love this book. It's a wonderful book. The question we're exploring today is, how shall I live? That is only a partial title to the chapter that he devotes in this book to that subject. The true title is, how shall I live knowing I will die? And so that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how we spend the time that we have given to us, knowing that it's limited and that it is finite. Now, in the West, in our culture, when people talk about death, and I mentioned it to a few people today, I said, we're going to talk about death, and they said, I'm not coming for that. And I thought, no, because I'm not talking about death, I'm talking about life. I'm talking about how we choose to live our lives. So let's just take a few minutes, see where this topic leads us, see what we can learn, and how looking at it from that perspective can bring what he calls clarity and courage to how we live our lives. And as you can tell from my sister's prayer request, I've had death on my mind. There's been, over the last few months, and I don't know how it's been for you all, but over the past few months there's been, it seems to me, an unusual amount of it in my circle, in my family, in my friends, in those I know. It just seems that there's more of it that seems to be present in my circle of awareness. And so I've been thinking about it. And that in part is what causes me to pick the title that I picked today. Wayne Mueller writes that in the Bhagavad Gita, the question is asked, what is the most wondrous of all the world's wonders? And the answer is given that no man, though he sees others dying around him, believes that he himself will die. I mean, we all smile at that, but think about how we live. I mean, I look at the way I live. How much time do I waste? How many days do I just go through complaining and thinking it's all work and thinking how put upon I am? And just, I'm not going to say the word, but it's not a good word, so I can't say it on video, but just wasting the time. Right? Just letting it go. And I don't know if that's true of anybody else, but it is certainly true of me. We know intellectually that we're going to die, but we don't live with that truth. We don't live as if we know it. We spend our days too often in mindless stuff, in unproductive relationships, in unhappy circumstances. We tell ourselves, now if this isn't resonant, just raise your hand, I'm there. We tell ourselves that we're going to make the changes we're going to make when? When the kids are older, when we have more money, when we move, when our job changes, when? The question this asks us is, if not now, when? If not now, when? We live as though our time is unlimited. We just do. That's perhaps the way we're wired. Now, it's not good to live every day in fear of death, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying to let it preoccupy your mind, to be morbid about it. However, I think when we deny the fact that we are all going to die, that's when we become more preoccupied with it. Because we focus on the fear, we wish to push it away. We tell ourselves that it's not going to happen. We just hyper-focus on it when we try to avoid it. When we accept the fact that that's the way it is, it's coming for all of us. It's a truth for all of us. That acceptance changes how we live our lives. Why? Because we approach every day as the precious gift that it is. I don't know about you, and this is a little strange, but I used to walk down the street just looking at the trees and the birds and the flowers, and I would look up and I would say out loud, I am really going to miss all this. Do you ever just have that energy? Just looking around thinking, this is wonderful, this is a gift, and I know it's not going to be here forever. I know I'm not going to be here forever. So I need to love it while I'm here. In his book, Mueller tells the story of a young man named Paul. His book is a lot of stories, a lot of anecdotes, and a lot of them are his patients, but he tells the story of a young man named Paul who was dying of cancer. And Paul, it was his last week of life, and Mueller was sitting with him about a week before he passed. And Paul says, I feel ready to go. I've done so much work to prepare for this moment. He said, I came to Santa Fe to deepen my life and to learn more about spiritual practice. I've learned yoga, practiced meditation with some wonderful teachers. I know I'm clear and whole inside. And when I feel that, I'm not afraid. I know it is time. And you can just imagine how much work he must have done to get there. And then he says, but I also wish I could stay here. I wish I had 10 more years free of this illness. With those 10 years, I could really live as I always wanted. And then there was silence. And Mueller finally said, how would you have liked to live? And Paul said, I would be kind. He said, I would live my life with kindness. I would teach that to children. What he found, what Mueller learned from Paul, is that his approaching death clarified for him what he found valuable and true and meaningful. Through that lens, he saw what was precious to him. So many spiritual practices incorporate awareness of death as part of their spiritual practice. Buddhists, and I didn't know this, but Buddhists have a practice called Maranasati, or death awareness, reminding us that life is impermanent and to treasure each and every day and to spend it wisely. Thich Nhat Hanh teaches, life is impermanent. It is precisely because of its impermanence that we value life so dearly. The Stoics, you know I love the Stoics, focused on their practice of memento mori, and I know we've all heard about that. Know that it's Latin, know that you will die. It's not to be morbid or fearful, but it's to know, it's just to remain aware, keep it in front of you, that every day is a precious gift. They know that in being aware that it was not permanent, we would live every day in joy and awareness and clarity and gratefulness. So as happened to Paul, we often don't focus on what truly matters until life just hits us upside the head. Isn't that true? Until life just smacks us off the rails. We just go along thinking we're all going to do it later. We're going to line everything up. We're going to get all our money. We're going to get our kids grown. We're going to get our job. And then we're going to have years to enjoy the fruits of it. Right? Sometimes that works out, and sometimes it doesn't. Mueller tells another story of a woman named Kirsten who was also diagnosed with cancer. Okay, so she got her diagnosis. She immediately assembled a team of caregivers, natural and traditional. She took Chinese remedies. She also took chemotherapy. She had surgery. She did everything that she could think of to regain her health. But she also rearranged her life. She also took a moment and thought about what was important to her. She spent less time at work. She spent more time at home alone or with friends. She spent more time in her garden. She meditated. And she had always wanted to paint, so she did. Why? She asked herself, if not now, when? If not now, when? So Mueller writes that as he and his other friends looked on, they kind of worried about Kirsten's ability to weather this challenge. But then they saw her, and he writes they started feeling jealous because she was living her life as she wanted to. That diagnosis had caused her to wake up and live her life as she wanted to. And then they thought, how stupid are we? Our lives are finite as well. We are all going to die. Why do we have to wait for some magical permission, and that's the phrase he used, some magical permission to start living life as we want it? We don't. We don't have to wait for anything. Now, Kirsten fortunately lived, but she had reached that awakening of what was important, and she kept many of those changes in her life. She told him, I am so grateful for my life. I don't take anything for granted. Every day is a miracle. Before, I would just make it through the day as if it was all just work. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Yeah. Now I feel such joy to just be alive each day. I'm much happier. Life is lighter. I only give my care and attention to what is really important. Being loved, being kind, creating beauty, being grateful. I'm reading a book now by Marcus Borg, another one of my favorite authors, called Convictions, and he turned 70. And it was a moment for him. He decided, I'm 70. If I don't tell the world what it is I believe, when am I going to do it? So he wrote a book called Convictions, and it's just about what he's learned in his life and the awakenings that he's had and what it is he believes. Because he also thought, if not now, when? That's not a bad question. We don't have to turn 70 or receive a terrifying diagnosis to realize that and start implementing changes in our life, start creating the joy we want in our lives. And it may not have to be huge, amazing things. Mueller writes that Buckminster Fuller has a concept that Fuller called trim tabs. And for those of you who are familiar at all with ships, big ships, before the world of hydraulics, it was really hard as the ship was going along in the water to turn a rudder. There was just too much water pressure. But they had these little tiny trim tabs that when you change them just a bit, changed the pressure. And the more trim tabs you applied, the easier it was to turn the ship. So little bits of pressure, little changes, made big changes. So that's not a bad question to ask ourselves. What little changes can we make? What little trim tabs can we apply that would give us lives of more joy and meaning and purpose? In his book, Mueller writes that the awareness that our time is finite gives us greater clarity on why we are alive. It gives us greater appreciation of why we are alive. It gives us this greater awareness that every day is a gift. He says this knowing gives rise to 5 practices that he believes help us create lives of joy and depth. The first is acceptance, which is a word I love. It's just acceptance. Acceptance of the truth of impermanence is acceptance of the truth. We're not running anymore. We understand that something that many of us regard as just the worst thing is going to happen. And when we accept that, we are no longer in fear of it. We simply live each day according to the wonder that we see in it. He tells the story of Buddhist teacher Akhan Cha, who had a student who asked him, how can you be happy in a world of such impermanence when you cannot protect your loved ones from harm, illness, and death? Cha held up a glass, and he said, someone gave me this glass. I really like this glass. It holds my water admirably, and it glistens in the sunlight. I touch it, and it rings. One day the wind will blow it off the shelf, or my elbow may knock it from the table. This glass is already broken. Even as I hold it in my hand, I know it is already on the floor in pieces, so I enjoy it incredibly. He accepted that the glass was impermanent. He accepted the beauty was here now, but would not always be. That's the Buddhist teaching of non-attachment, right? Isn't that the teaching is that life is dukkha, life is suffering. And it's not that life is invariably suffering, it's that our attachment to things which we cannot keep forever creates suffering. He could enjoy the present reality of this beautiful glass, knowing it would break and be gone. He didn't diminish his pleasure in that beautiful thing by investing himself in the delusion that it would always be there. Does that make sense? He could just be with it right now, accepting that it would not be there forever, but that didn't diminish how wonderful it was right then. The second trait that Mueller talks about is effortlessness. Effortlessness. Acceptance and effortlessness. Sometimes in our lives, we search so hard for answers, especially here in the West. We have a notion that if anything is of value, we have to work so hard to get it. Do you agree with me? If it means anything, we got to just kill ourselves getting to it. We work, we push, and if we don't succeed, we just push harder because it's really worth getting, and the way you get it is to push. We exhaust ourselves in the process. Even with spiritual practices, I mean, I'm like this. If I don't meditate 20 minutes in the morning, I'm a complete failure. Does this make sense? No, it's not. We are so hard on ourselves. If I don't read for an hour a day, something uplifting is all. No, that's not how it works. We make it too hard. And that's not what the great teachers taught. What did Jesus teach? He said, "Come to me, all ye who are heavy laden, I will give you rest." He didn't say, "I will make life harder." He said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Right? The Buddhist teaching in the Dhammapada is that simple purity of thought will bring happiness that will follow us as reliably as our own shadow. Simple purity of thought. The Tao teaches the way of effortless action, or Wu Wei. This is a tough concept because effortless action for me and my little mind don't go together. But I think of water. How does water wear away rock? How does water create the Grand Canyon? Just by being water. By going around and continuing and going around and around and around. It follows the natural flow of what it is. Like water, when we behave in the natural flow of who we are, of what we are, our strength is unlimited. Lao Tzu says, "Whoever forces it spoils it. Whoever grasps it loses it." So what does that mean for us in practice? It means stop. It means breathe. It means listen. It means rest. If you just stop pushing, if you just listen and pay attention to your own natural rhythms, you will hear what you love. You will hear what you are to do. You will hear what you value. Trust the process. Trust your heart. You just need to listen. Because you are in the flow. That's what we believe. We are all of God. There is nothing else. It's not that everything in the universe is God except you. Right? Listen, and you will hear it. The third is remembering. Acceptance, effortlessness, and remembering. Looking at each day as a gift brings an energy of the sacred and the wonderful to all in it. Remember that the world is a holy place. All we do are holy things, all of it. One of my favorite wisdom teachers is Father Richard Rohr. He teaches that organized religion sometimes makes a mistake, and we buy into it, that our lives are divided. There is the holy, which is now, we're all in a holy moment here in case you were wondering. And then there's the worldly, which is the minute we leave the door, right? We're here, we're sacred, we go out into the world. That's not the way it is. All of it is sacred, all of it is holy, and what makes the difference is the energy you bring to it. It's the consecration you bring to it. That's what Martin Buber taught. It is not the nature of the task, but it's consecration. That is the vital thing. When we approach life with that energy, that is where the joy comes from. Mother Teresa said, all the way to heaven is heaven. If you are doing something that is painful, stop. If you have a teacher who makes you feel bad, find another one. The way to heaven itself is heaven. We just need to remember who we are. We need to remember that we are in the flow and that life is joyful and that we should be aware and joyful as we engage in it. Whatever we are doing, even if it's something we don't want to do, and God knows in my life there's enough of it. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote of doing dishes. Okay, I just thought of that, one of my perennial chores. That's what I do at home in case anyone's wondering. He wrote, "To my mind, the idea that doing dishes is unpleasant can occur only when you aren't doing them." Isn't that true? The minute you start, he says, once you're standing in front of the sink with your sleeves rolled up and your hands in the warm water, it really is quite pleasant. I enjoy taking my time with, this is Thich Nhat Hanh, for God's sake. He says, I enjoy taking my time with each dish, being fully aware of the dish, the water, and each movement of my hands. I know that if I hurry in order to eat dessert sooner, the time of washing dishes will be unpleasant and not worth living. That would be a pity. For each minute, each second of life is a miracle. The dishes themselves and the fact that I am here washing them are miracles. He challenges us to open our eyes and awaken to the truth. As Teilhard de Chardin wrote, the world is in truth a holy place. And we know that. We just need to remember it. The next element is simplicity. Mueller writes that a life is made of days. Think of it that way. A life is made of days. Each day is an opportunity to say something honestly, to make something more beautiful, to create something precious, to give a gift only we can provide for the family of the earth. To dedicate a single act to the healing of others is a day well lived. Doesn't that just lift you up? Simple things add up to days well lived. Ecclesiastes teaches there is nothing better for you than to find joy in what you are given to do, for doing is your lot. So the question becomes, what is before you to do? Don't you find sometimes that you think your day is wasted unless you've done something magnificent, unless you've done something great, unless people have noticed what you've done? No, your day is well spent if you just do the simple things. You hold the hand of a child, you wipe the brow of someone who is sick, you bring food to someone who needs it, you tend your garden, you smile at a stranger. The simple things make up days well lived. Our days are so filled with busyness, we're rushing from one thing to the next, we never notice the wonderful opportunities that are right in front of us to bring joy, to bring comfort, to connect with somebody who is right there. Slow down, he teaches. It's the simple things that make up days well lived. Jack Kornfield and his family lived for a while in Thailand. And so when they got back from Thailand, he told Mueller, he said, I was so disorganized. I just couldn't live. I was losing my keys. I was locking myself out of my house. I was forgetting where I was. I was just dropping things. And then he realized that when he and his family lived in Thailand, they had done one thing at a time. They had done one thing at a time, and then they had finished it and moved on to the next thing. And then they came back here, the land of multitasking, where we do 12 things at a time. And things just started to fall apart, and he understood the value of just doing one thing at a time, being present for that one thing at a time, and then moving on to the next thing. And the last element that Mueller talks about is gratefulness. Right? Didn't you just know that would be the last one? Gratefulness. Because it changes the energy of everything we do. It's the energy of co-creation. It's the energy of wonder. Brother David Steindl Rast calls gratefulness a spontaneous response of the human heart to the gratuitously given. Right? It's nothing we buy, it's nothing we earn, it's just what we are given. What just presents in front of us, a beautiful flower, a smile, a friend, a moment. Just wonder at the gratuitously given. Living in gratitude, it just changes the energy of your days. Why? Well, for one thing, you are aware. When you live in gratefulness, you are aware of what's going around you because you're focusing on it, right? And you're not in fear. Being grateful and being in fear are mutually exclusive. You cannot do it. It changes the energy of how you live your life. You see it all differently. And not because everything is going well. It may not be. But you are still grateful for the beauty and the wonder of what is going well, for the treasures that you are given. Mueller tells the story of a cancer patient named Kenneth. Actually, he was an AIDS patient named Kenneth. And it was in the last few days of his life, and he couldn't walk. but he really wanted to go out and be outside. And his caregiver said, Kenneth, you cannot do that. You can't get from here to there. And she turned around and Kenneth was out the door. And he took a few steps and he just collapsed. And she ran over to him, screaming, Kenneth, are you okay? And he looked up at her and smiled. He said, the sun feels so good on my face. And he had 4 days to live. His body was racked with infection, and he was grateful. He didn't require anything to change. He didn't require a healing in order to be grateful. He said, the sun feels so good on my face. Because he could be aware of the beauty that was right in front of him and what he was given in that moment. Gratefulness is also the energy of connection, isn't it? When we are grateful, we appreciate, what is it we call it? The interbeing. We appreciate the connection, the interconnection of all life. We see that we are tied into the fabric of each other and all of it. A traditional prayer before meals in many Buddhist monasteries is 72 laborers brought us this food. We should know how it comes to us. Think about that as you ate your breakfast this morning. 72 laborers brought us this food. We should know how it comes to us. Those who tilled the earth, those who planted, the sun, the water, the earth itself, the harvester, all of it. We are connected to everyone who brought us that nourishment. And when we think about it, when we are aware of that connection, how can we not be grateful? Gratefulness is the energy of connection. So this is not a talk about death. This is a talk about life. This is a talk about appreciating our life, being aware of each day as a precious gift that it is, and asking you, if not now, when, how you want to live the precious days that are in front of us. So let me close with a quote from Mueller's book on spiritual practice. He says, the heart of most spiritual practice is simply this: remember. Remember who you are. Remember what you love. Remember what is sacred. Remember what is true. Remember that you will die and that this day is a gift. Remember how you wish to live. We can do that right now, and what a blessing that is.